Nicole, can you hear us? Can you hear us? Can you try to talk to us, please?
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
I can't hear it. This thing is frozen. I can't get the Zoom mic.
I don't know where you're coming from, but it doesn't sound very clear.
Like this, we can't hear you, Nicole.
You can't hear me at all?
But you can hear us.
I can hear you.
The tablet here is like frozen. I think something is wrong with the Extron.
Oh no.
You can still hear us, Nicole?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm coming through, but for some reason, this Extron froze up and I can't control the Zoom audio. We put it in the Chrome. I'm turning it off and I'll see if that helps.
So I had to leave that unmuted as I mentioned. So that's why I let everyone know that the voice is quiet.
Hopefully this thing moves back up. Good.
What about Thomas?
It's just not. I think, can you hear them?
And you do any like findings for no.
Can you hear us all, Nicole?
Yeah, I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes?
That's sound system because it wasn't taking us at all.
Oh, okay. Okay. Is what are you speaking through right now? Is it just the ceiling mic?
That was a good
Like, I can't hear anything now.
Nicole, can you hear us?
Yes.
Can you hear the folks talking in the back?
No.
How about now?
No.
Can you hear them now? How about now?
No. No.
You can't hear anybody talking in the back?
No. Is the ceiling mic not working now?
I can't tell if it's on or not. Hold on just a minute. Can you hear it now?
A little bit. Is the AV room door open?
Yes.
Okay, try closing that to see if that makes a difference.
There are folks talking in the back. Can you hear that, Nicole? Farrah, can you say hi real quick to Nicole?
Yeah, but it doesn't sound like it's coming from that mic.
No, Vera, try again.
I mean, I can hear her, but it sounds really distant, not like she's standing under the mic.
Okay, hold on.
Yes, but you all, if you didn't spend your money last year, you drove your budget. So you didn't know you have a budget? Oh, I'll send it to you right now.
I feel like I can hear now.
You can hear now?
Yeah.
Can you hear now?
Yes.
Farrah, do you think she can hear you?
Can you hear me now?
It's a Verizon commercial, guys. Yes, yeah, it's better. I would say let's make sure that if the door to the lobby isn't closed, let's close that too, because I think it's about trying to cut down the background noise.
She's just saying that she can hear out there now.
I can't hear them now.
Can you hear me? You can't hear them? You can hear them at all?
I'm gonna hold on a second. Where is my mouse?
Can you hear them, Nicole?
Yes, I can. Sorry, I had my volume very much turned up and was not prepared for that. Is the door to the lobby, is that closed?
All the doors are closed now.
Okay. Can someone at the back table try speaking?
Vera, how are you doing today?
It's not working now.
Can you hear if I talk like this?
Yes.
All right. Welcome to our handheld mic.
Okay, you know what I think it is? Because I can hear it now.
Light show.
It's working fine now. Now it's working fine. I can hear everyone now.
Vera has the handheld mic, that's why.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. I guess the handheld mic is really hot then and picking everyone else up too.
Yeah, hopefully.
Okay.
Now I gotta get back on the TVs. Hold on.
So I'm gonna go ahead and come up on the full table. I'll hit the light when I bring up the audio. As he's doing this last bit. So I'm gonna bring up the room. Okay.
Lights, camera, action.
No, because it's not coming back on the TV.
Do you want me to pull up some crying baby on Spotify?
For some reason, it won't talk to the TVs anymore.
It's on top of the TV.
Yeah.
Council, who missed the moment, Kat and Meyer decided to do an interpretive dance for the PD's update, talking about.
I've unplugged that and plugged that in like 3 times.
Wow. It was so good, and I mean, all the skits were great, but that one, that's fire related, isn't that right?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, members of council. Here to talk about a new package of code amendments related to Title 17. It's our land division code. Okay. This package of proposed amendments involves comprehensive review and overhaul of Title 17. Staff has made small amendments to Title 17 over the years, but we've not done a comprehensive review in a very long time. So the proposed amendments affect nearly every section of Title 17, and these are our project goals and objectives. We want to make sure that the code accurately reflects current state law, specifically when it relates to middle housing and middle housing land division. We want to make sure that we're including clear and objective standards throughout the code for all the various kinds of applications for land division. We want to remove redundant or confusing language within the code, and sometimes that happens when you start layering code amendments over the years and you don't sort of look at the whole thing all at once. We want to clarify and simplify review processes. That's both for the benefit of the applicant and for staff. And we want to address any recent legislation, again, back to the state law and the middle housing. And we do want to reorganize it for clarity. There was a lot of, well, I'll get to this, but there were a lot of redundant numbering systems and so on that we try to clean up and make it look a little bit more consistent with the rest of the code. Title 17 kind of lives on in its own little world, and it looks like it. So we're trying to streamline that and make it a bit more consistent with the rest of the code as well. This is our basic process for a cleanup type of code process here. We had a work session with the Planning Commission in the late fall. We're having this work session here with you folks. We will provide notification, of course, to the NDAs of the code amendment package. The code commentary is being posted with the 30-day notice on Thursday of this week. And then, of course, we'll have our public hearings. 35-day notice went to DLCD and to Metro today. So we're moving ahead with that process. And again, we're not proposing any kind of policy changes through this code. We are streamlining and making some changes in that respect, but policy types of decisions are not being affected as part of this code process.
Can you clarify the code commentary piece? I don't remember that from prior packages.
Yeah, so the code commentary is when we post the 30-day notice that the code has been posted, we don't just post the underlined strikeout version of the code by itself. We create a package called the code commentary. So the underlined strikeout version of the code is posted, but there's a commentary section in front of it that talks about the purpose of the amendments. It sort of talks about it in more conversational type of language to explain what we're doing. We posted that with the Hubs code amendments last week. I guess it was last week, the CFEC code as well. So even the housekeeping code amendments, we always have sort of a commentary section in the front of the package to just orient people to what underlined strikeout code even is, what we're doing, and describes kind of what's the point of the code amendment package. So, yeah.
Is this something you do with all code amendments or just land use related or like
Land use code amendments, type 5 land use code amendments, we always do a code commentary for basically code text amendments or even map amendments as well. So we always post that in there, yeah. Okay, so in the staff report, we put together kind of a way to organize what kinds of amendments we were putting forth for this. So we do have some formatting and redundant language kinds of amendments. We eliminated what we believe to be a needless table of contents for the section. Every definition, for example, had its own number. So it was in its own code section, which we don't do in any other code section. So we took all of that out, and it's just a regular definitions section, like any other code language. We reorganized the language so that there's a separate section just for middle housing land divisions. We kind of had it when we did the Senate Bill 458 amendments, we sort of had it in the preliminary plat and then had it in the final plat. And as we've been working through this and we've had folks ask us about middle housing land division, as we've looked at the overall code, it seemed to make more sense to put it in its own section all by itself, so that if folks are looking at a middle housing land division, which is different from other kinds, it just lives in its own section. And so it makes it clearer both for staff to point people to the code, but also for folks looking at the code, where do they need to go for that? We tried to reduce the numbers of lists in the code. We do have checklists that we provide to folks when they do a preliminary plat or a final plat. So we try to take some of that out of the code and have it as a checklist. That's easier to update. And that way we're not doing code amendments every time we think we need a different kind of survey or something for a preliminary plat. So it keeps things simpler in the code as well. Okay. We took a comprehensive look at our review process and application requirements for the various kinds of land division. So we rewrote that whole section for the land division types. One of the bigger changes that we're proposing here is that we're removing the required type 3 review for subdivisions. So a subdivision is 4 lots or more that you're creating. Our current code right now requires that to be a type 3 land use application before the Planning Commission. We believe that that's unnecessary to go through a Planning Commission public hearing process just because of the number of lots you're creating. Subdivisions ought to be math. It's clear and objective standards, number of lots. Are you creating public right-of-way? Do you meet the mathematical standards for creating a subdivision or a number of lots? Certainly type 3 would be necessary if someone needed a variance to any of the standards for creating the lots. But we are proposing to have it be a type 2 process. It still has public notice, but it is a planning manager decision, of course, with engineering input into the land use application. So folks will hear about it, but it won't be a full public hearing before the Planning Commission because it's not a discretionary decision. If they meet all the standards, it gets approved. So that's one of the things that we're proposing here. We are also proposing to revise some of the language to clearly identify filing deadlines and for when permits will or will not be accepted until a final plat is recorded. So some of our processes, there are different filing deadlines and established expiration dates within Title 17 that don't align with Title 19 expiration dates and extensions and that sort of thing. And we thought it made sense to keep them together and have them run together. It provides a lot. We wanted to make sure that we had clear deadlines and we wanted to recognize the county process for plat review and recording. We've had instances where folks got held up for several months at the county surveyor's office for review. And that's no fault of theirs, it's just they have a really long queue, but that ran up against our deadlines. And so our deadlines didn't align with what could be happening at the county. So at the end of the day, we wanted to make sure that folks had enough time to get through the county review process, record the final plat, and we're still protected because we won't issue permits until the plat's recorded. So even if something takes longer at the county level for their review and recording, they're not we're still protected by we won't issue permits, we won't even accept permits until the plat's recorded at the county. So that way we aren't going through an expiration or extension process on our end because the county had a long queue of review on their end. So we were just running up against just extra kind of review and type 2 reviews and so on that didn't help anybody. Code hadn't changed, there wasn't any reason to not extend it. So we were just processing extensions or expirations or something for no real reason. So we wanted to make sure that we at least had it aligned with our Title 19 expiration and extension sections. So it keeps it all the same.
Yeah.
Yes.
Did you fix that by extending the timing or by making contingent upon county action and then a new deadline? So how do you fix this problem?
Yes, so if you need an extension through Title 17, you're going through the Title 19 extension process. Our current Title 17 process has within 6 months of preliminary plat review, you have to submit for a final plat. But if the county is still reviewing that preliminary plat, that 6 months doesn't really mean anything, and it just kind of holds everything up on our end because that 6 months fits into that process. Then if you don't record your final plat within a certain amount of time, you have to start over. And again, it's a waste of time and process for everybody when it's just something that's an administrative issue from some other department. Yeah. Okay. We have added some new language into the code. One of the sections of new code relates to tracts and easements. Particularly, this has related to subdivisions that we've already reviewed, but it does relate to middle housing land divisions as well, because when you're setting up a land division, there may be tracts for something like a stormwater management system or something, and it's actually on a separate tract within the development. There will likely be easements as part of any of these developments, particularly middle housing land division, and I've got a couple of graphics that can talk about that. So what we wanted to do is those terms are defined in the existing code, but ownership and maintenance are not spelled out in our existing code. So you might be able to create a tract or easements, but it doesn't say anywhere in there what happens to those things and who's in charge of them. So the new language provides staff and applicants with language about how they're supposed to be handled in the future, and hopefully minimizing conflict when the development is complete and homeowners or tenants change, so that there's actually language about responsibility for those, again, for tracts or easements that are part of the plat itself that gets recorded. So we talk about them in our existing code, but it doesn't talk about who's responsible for them, and that can be a problem later on down the line. We also have added a section talking about remainder or leftover land. I have a graphic that goes to that too. But this talks about, it's about when we've got an issue with a larger parcel, and I'll just show you. For example, this property, and there are natural resources on this property. If you know that the creek is down here, is down along the bottom, pretend that's not there. This is truly for illustrative purposes. We have a lot of oversized lots that are long and skinny. And we have had folks come in particular on this property and other properties, where there's an existing home on one part or one end of the property. That line that you see that's sort of drawn is when the homeowner comes in and says, you know what, I just want to carve off my house and sell the rest of it to a developer. I'm not the developer. I don't want to do anything with that. I just want my house and sell that later. The problem or the challenge that comes up is that we have minimum density that needs to be shown when you do a land division like this. And what we didn't want to have happen is have someone come in, I'm just going to do this partition and I can meet minimum density because we've got middle housing now. And we never actually determine or kind of confirm that the minimum density will be achieved on that new parcel. So we wanted to make sure that we've covered ourselves. We haven't created a loophole for that. So we are calling it actually, it's a section that talks about leftover land when you're doing a partition like this. So someone could still do that. You could still have your homeowner, do the partition. But what we've done is that the new language puts requirements on the partition that anticipates future development on that sort of second piece, the vacant piece that gets created, and restricts any permit review on that leftover piece until minimum density is achieved through another partition. Or so there has to be another land use action that has to happen, or another land division on that empty piece. So it doesn't prevent the homeowner from partitioning off and keeping their property, but it does make sure that the developer or whomever they sell it to needs to achieve minimum density on that empty parcel. We didn't want to run into a situation where we did the partition and someone builds a house on that and kind of, I'll get to minimum density later, and it never happens. We want to make sure that we are achieving that minimum density through that process. So it does, so that we've got language that has those requirements for that.
Was this change prompted by a real case?
This lot in particular, we did have the folks that own the house come in and want to do exactly this. And we were trying to figure out, okay, how do we make sure, and no one was trying to get away with anything, but it was one of these, what do we do with that? What do we do with the rest of it, right? So we don't have a ton of these kinds of oversized parcels, but especially now with middle housing, that kind of capacity to be able to achieve minimum density it's harder for us to do than when we used to only allow singles and doubles and duplexes on properties. And you have the capacity for a duplex, great, but now there's a lot more ways to achieve that density. And we just want to make sure we don't lose the opportunity to get to the density that we need. Yeah. Yeah, we won't issue building permits on that second lot until they come in with another land use action to do the division. Yeah. So it's just, we're basically restricting permits until we've got another action happening on that larger piece. And we borrowed that language from Gresham, has similar language. The planners all talk once a month about all this middle housing, and that came up because this situation had come up, and one of their planners pointed me to their language, like, okay, this is great. And so we kind of borrowed it and tweaked it a little bit for us, but I think it's going to work because it keeps everybody, on a level playing field for future development.
Are there any was the county's unincorporated areas that are nearby our city.
Oh, interesting. I know that, the way I'll answer that, I don't know their code really well, to be fair, but we've had folks who are in unincorporated, like close by, on the other side of Linwood, for example, or something like that, that have wanted to incorporate or come in to annex into the city. I think some of our middle housing code is a little more flexible than what I'm seeing that the county has. Detached plexes, for example, I don't think the county allows those. I'd have to confirm, so I think there are some things that we're doing a little bit differently. I mean, obviously, we're all meeting the ORS and the requirements, but I think our code is a little bit different from theirs, so,
Did the
yeah.
county write their own code, or did they just take the state code?
I think they wrote their own code. I don't think they took the state code, but again, I'd have to go, I don't know their code very well at all, so I'd have to check back on that with you. Okay. And there are a couple of slides here that just talks about some of the issues or a particular issue that we've identified related specifically to middle housing land divisions. So there's a couple of graphics here that just talk about, again, what is a middle housing land division. So this is a very simple graphic of a triplex. And then you can see the orange lines sort of are introduced as the new middle housing lots. So the way our code is written, we talk about middle housing land division as a parent lot and the child lots or the sub lots. So the parent lot is the overall big square, and then the child lots are each individual middle housing lot. Our code requires the development standards to be met on the parent lot. So perimeter setbacks need to be met. Overall lot coverage, overall vegetation, minimum vegetation is overall on the parent lot. Because of the way the law is written, the middle housing lot lines can be basically drawn anywhere as long as it meets building code. So you can have 0 lot line for the middle housing lots. Basically, the interior lots are the ones that can get placed. So another thing to, and again, following the state code, this is still a triplex lot. Each dwelling is on its own lot, and that's required. You can only have one dwelling unit on a lot, and each lot has to have its own utilities. Where it gets tricky, and this is part of what we've kind of identified, is that we're still thinking of this as a triplex. Those aren't individual single-family homes or anything like that. For example, here's another example. This is an existing triplex that was built on 29th. But if they were to introduce middle housing land division, these new lot lines, one of the things that we're kind of thinking about, and there isn't a good answer for it, is that, so this is still a triplex, but each unit is on its own lot and can be sold individually. But we're thinking about the property still as a triplex lot. So one of the things that has come up is, well, what if unit number 1 wants to build a shed in the backyard, as an example? But we understand what the maximum lot coverage is for the parent lot, for the whole thing. So one of the things that we're thinking about is, well, what if in the future any one of those units wants to build a shed and kind of eats up all the extra lot coverage for the whole triplex? How are we checking that? How are we we would certainly be doing that on our end with, okay, parent lot is this, you're adding this, nobody else in this triplex gets a shed because you're over the lot coverage, or you're going to need a variance or something like that. It's just something that we've been thinking about, and I've been talking to other planners in other communities, and yeah, we're all just recognizing that this is something that we're all thinking about how we need to track. It's not something that we've codified because we can't. I've talked to the state about that too, but I'm just sort of I'm just kind of bringing you into back of house, kind of what we're dealing with the middle housing land division. We are getting some kind of interest in some folks doing it. So just kind of wanted to illustrate some of the complications that can happen with that process, as far as that goes.
On both
Yeah.
this one and the previous
Mhm.
graphic,
Yeah.
the parent lot is the entire.
Correct. Yeah.
I see.
Yeah. Here's a,
Can you go back to the,
sure.
I had a couple questions. about
Yeah.
that one. I'm sorry, I'm not, do you have
Well,
another?
no, I was just gonna say, the same problem exists for this as well.
Absolutely.
As opposed to
Yes.
like, I
Yeah.
don't know, 3 does whatever, it screws up. not necessarily screws up, but affects one.
It
and two.
affects all of them. They're all in it together
Yeah.
when it comes to lot coverage, vegetation, all of those things. I mean, in this particular example, the driveway, and so on, there are generally easements on these things. If somebody needs to get across somebody's lot to get to something else, there might be shared green space that they all get access to. I mean, every one of these is going to look a little bit different depending on how they're laid out. This one is a little more straightforward because everybody's yard is on their lot. Nobody needs to cross anybody else's property to get there. This one's a little more straightforward. This is an example of, this is on Wichita. This exists except for the red lot lines. So there's an existing house, they had an existing accessory building, and then an existing sort of secondary building, and then they built another. So this is this was built as and permitted as a detached triplex. But in this scenario, I'm pretending that they've converted another of those structures, so we actually have a detached quadplex on this lot. And if they started drawing lines, again, it's just another illustration of how, you know, the kind of the back three lots are, they are definitely dependent on the front lot certainly for access and so, sorry.
The one on the right?
Yes, the one on the right, sorry. Wichita is kind of along the right-hand side. Again, this is illustrative only. It's been approved as the triplex, it's great, but if they wanted to come in and do a middle housing land division, then we start kind of thinking about, again, just the perimeter setbacks are the ones that matter when it comes to our set development standards. The interior lot lines can be drawn anywhere. So minimum setbacks don't apply to the middle housing land division lots, or to those setbacks, as long as it meets building code for separation or what have you against, you know, a zero lot line kind of thing. So, go ahead. So the perimeter setbacks, the parent lot setbacks are the ones that have to meet our development standards. So front yard, side, rear, so the 5 and 5 and 20, that's it. But on the inside, so I don't know if this is the pointer, I don't want to, but anyway, the middle lot down at the bottom, for example, those lot lines could be really close to the structure, because we can't enforce lot coverage or any of that on the individual child lots.
Well, so
Yeah.
two slides back, which I
Yeah.
still want to talk about.
Sure.
Yeah, that's a good
Yeah.
example of that.
Exactly.
The lot lines are the
Yeah.
walls of the house, basically.
Yep, exactly. We don't require frontage, you know, in a middle housing land division or anything like that. Nope, none of it. Just the outside, kind of the perimeter
So
setbacks,
when
yeah.
you had this slide up before, you said that the utilities had to come to each.
Yeah. They can't,
parcel.
yeah, you can't
So-
share
So
utilities.
so that back, I'm assuming the street, we see the street.
Yes, yep, yep.
So that unit 3 has to have a pipe, it can't just have internal pipe.
Correct.
It has to have a.
It's coming
pipe in the
straight from the
ground
main, yep.
That comes
Yeah,
back.
yeah.
Okay. And it can't go under the house, it has to go out in the freeway?
I believe so. So there would be easements, you know, for whose utilities are crossing, whose property to the unit. That's specific to the state law. That's not ours. It's 1 unit per child lot. No future land division can happen. So none of these could have an ADU or anything like that. It's just the 1 dwelling unit per lot, and they all have to have separate utilities, so that nobody is dependent on anybody else to make sure that they get their utilities. They really are supposed to live as their own lot. They just happen to be configured differently.
And so the people who build this have to decide that before they build it.
So we try, that's another little back of house. How does the sausage get made on our end? When folks come in and talk to us about what they want to do, we try to ask them all of these kinds of questions. We have a house right now that is putting up, it's the house they've already put in, and it's already occupied an ADU, and now they're doing a second ADU. So there will be 3 dwellings on the property. When it was a house and 2 ADUs, there were different setbacks. ADUs have smaller setbacks. But then they've been thinking about, oh, maybe we should not do this as a condominium, for example. We'd like to do this as a middle housing land division. Okay, we're just going to put the brakes on this for a second and talk to you about where your utilities need to come in, because you can't share them like you could for an ADU. And one of the second ADU actually needs to move because it doesn't meet the setbacks for the perimeter. ADUs get a break on setbacks. They can be as close as 5 feet. Now it's a triplex. and a triplex has a 20-foot rear yard, so they need to move that. So otherwise they need a variance. So we're trying to, while we continue to call things different things are an ADU or it's a duplex or it's a, if where our code is specific to, if you're an ADU, these are your standards. If you're a triplex, these are your standards. So we're trying to make sure that, that folks think about these things well in advance before they, get married to plans or, are actually in the ground already doing things. Separate utilities are expensive, they just need to understand the cost implications and I guess really there are pros and cons to all of these processes. Single lots, I guess, are easier, a fee simple kind of sales piece, but they're more expensive to develop because of all of this other stuff, right? So, and condos and homeowners associations, some folks have issues with that from a sales standpoint. So this is intended to give people an alternative to yeah. Yeah. The Middle Housing Land Division is intended to be an alternative to a condominium kind of situation where you've got 3 units on a lot, you can still sell them, but everybody's kind of beholden to everybody else. But it just comes with, there are other things to think about when you do it that way. Yeah.
Well, these requests are coming.
They are, yep.
And so,
yeah.
Would it be possible, or is this solution too simple, do you take the allowable area
Mm-hmm.
at a triplex and divide it by 3, and that's how big their shed can be? Or does that end up being a closet-sized shed?
Right. So, yeah, the issue is that Senate Bill 458 doesn't allow us to restrict any individual child lot. So I can't tell each child lot that your lot coverage is X. It's the whole parent lot is how we don't regulate the child lots. We regulate the parent lot.
Okay.
So it's a great idea and we thought about it. And then I talked to the state and they said, yeah, your child lots you can't tell them how much they're allowed to build. It's the whole parent. They're tied together regardless. Yeah.
So all the owners of the triplexes, can they grant one of the other child lots the authority to use up the allowable area?
That's exactly what we're wondering how that's going to work.
Okay.
So yes, if
All right,
they
that
do
sounds
that.
hard. I'm gonna let you figure
Yeah.
it out.
Wait, Counselor Senator.
Yeah.
Well, actually, if you had a question that was based off of, okay, because mine's different. Well, I'm thinking about worst case scenarios, of course.
Mhm.
Let's bring you all the worst case scenarios. And I'm wondering about financing.
Yeah.
So developers that are financing a project,
Mhm.
and let's say that things don't go as planned. What does that look like within the timeline in Title 17 or 19 or even, if it
Mhm.
goes beyond that?
So I just want to understand what you mean. So they've submitted an application for a Middle Housing Land Division and then realized they don't want to do it that way. They want to have it just be 3 units on 1 lot, the end. Is that what you're asking, or?
They submitted for a land division, they
Mhm.
build the first unit, and then they don't have enough money to continue with the other 2. What happens?
Oh, I see what you're saying. So the Middle Housing Land Division has to be submitted concurrently with building permits. So because part of their application, and again from the state law as well, they have to show and they have to verify that the units will meet the Oregon Residential Specialty Code. And the way they do that is by showing us either approved building permits, because they already did that, or they're submitting them at the same time, and we wait until everything is kind of all at the same time. Certainly, the Middle Housing Land Division, they could submit the building permits, they've got their final plat for the land, I've got 3 lots now, and maybe they can't build one of the units, or they decide not to. It's still gonna be a triplex, and there's still only that 1 unit that can be built there, because it would be like any subdivision. You've created the lots, and you don't build on one of them, so it's
Nothing
possible.
else could be built on that lot until the third triplex
Correct,
would be built.
yeah.
Okay.
So that's kind of, they're tied together. That's kind of how that would work, sure.
I guess, from the ownership point, like, so let's say somebody sells the unit 1
Mm-hmm.
of the triplex, so anything that they want to do on that property
Yes. So, if unit number 1 wanted to build an addition on it still has to be on their own lot, right? But they wouldn't, in this case, it's pretty constrained as a unit goes. Maybe so unit 1 wants to build an addition off the back or something, or they want to their covered deck goes out further or something like that. We're recalculating the lot coverage and so on for the entire triplex when unit 1 comes in. So again, we've been trying to figure out, when the first one comes in, how are we tracking what's happening here? It hasn't happened yet. No, I know that the example that I provided of the house with the 2 ADUs, they have emailed us and said, we'd like to do this as a middle housing land division. So, okay, here are the things you need to do. A middle housing land division is a type 2 application, but it's an expedited application. So we get 2 weeks to do a completeness review as opposed to the 30 days we normally do. And then then we have 63 days within which to issue a decision as opposed to the 120 that we would normally get.
And that's
So,
set by the state?
yep, that's all in the state. So everything's compressed. There's still public notice and all of that, but it's a compressed, timeline. So, yeah, so and the state, and it's in the code, sort of what the conditions of approval have to be, and that's all laid out by the state. No further land division, all these different things are all notations that have to be put on the plat when it gets recorded, that it's recorded as a middle housing land division. So there's no confusion down the road what those units are, yeah.
And the city so state law prohibits the city from, it has to treat as the parent lot as the
Right.
lot, but the city could potentially grant a variance where they let everyone have a shed or whatever.
Absolutely, yes. It
Not
just,
that I'm saying that we should, or
Yeah.
that's a great, but it's.
right. It introduces the variance. I mean, the variance is definitely an option. I think what we've been thinking about, because we scenarioed that as well, then I guess all 3 have to be signatories to the application because they're all affected by the variance because it's the parent lot, right? So we've been thinking about, okay, who's the applicant, for a variance so that lot 1 can have a really big shed because it's affecting all of their lot coverage. If they get a variance, then everybody's getting more variance. So they all everybody has to be friends somehow in this whole process, I guess.
Or as part of the land division, so it's the one owner that comes forth and says, I want to do a land division, and while I'm at it, I want to get a variance for 3 sheds, because I know it's going to be a tight deal.
Then that would be, we would handle that at the very, very beginning. Yes, yeah. Some of these issues that we're thinking about are ones that happen down the road, when one of these units has already turned over, I've got a new owner that wants a shed, you're all kind of locked in. If things like that ought to happen right out of the gate, at the very beginning, when they're submitting permits and they're submitting for their middle housing land division. So we're trying to really script our conversations with developers or folks that are interested in kind of asking them a ton of questions. What do you want to do with this at the end? Because it matters. And we don't want people to have to now retrench and start doing utilities separate, after the fact. That would be a nightmare. So we're really trying to have folks think about what they want early. Yeah.
So in your previous slide, you've got access, you've got easement and access issues for all the lots, right?
Yeah.
But on that slide,
Yeah.
there, you don't have that.
Correct.
Nobody is dependent on the other lots. So can they not be just, when we have 1,500 square foot minimum lot for can they not just be that?
They could.
They could, and then we would get rid of the
Right.
parent lot thing. They would just be their individual lots.
This would come in as a townhouse development.
Right.
And then you don't have any of those issues. So, yes, so attached individual units like this that front right on a street. Again, that's when we have those conversations too. Are you a townhouse? Are you middle housing? What are we doing? Townhouses have slightly different standards, but it's, again, back to people really thinking about what they want. On a lot like this that's fronting the street, townhouse development is probably a simpler way to go. And because they're right out of the gate, they already are, these individual lots, we've got the standards, you're done. They're built that way, it's really specific. Middle housing land division is something's built, and then they want to come in and put lot lines in after the fact. And so or they just haven't done it yet. And it's a whole spreadsheet of options, which is part of the challenges. Yeah.
A lot of this would be very difficult to navigate for even a developer that has been through, a lot of different scenarios.
Yeah.
So I guess since there are several, or maybe all cities are struggling with these questions, I'm thinking about the liability that that we're stepping into in terms of pre-application, pre-development application conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess, is there something that we already have that is like a written menu that can be provided? Because I guess, so, this conversation, we've been able to unearth that maybe the parent lot concept is not the best on this particular slide. Maybe they should consider a townhouse. But if the developer comes in and they're like, hey, we're gonna do middle housing, we're gonna do a triplex, we've got this all, and then for some reason, maybe the townhouse option doesn't come to mind for the planner that's part of those conversations, then the developer comes back a few years later and they're like, now I've got all this mess and I need to do variances and I need to get signatures of things. I guess I'm trying to think of like how we can script that process quite literally so that we can protect liability on the part of the city.
No, it's a great question. And trying to figure out if your property is this, you have these, there are a lot of options, and I think we need to kind of wrap our brains around what's a simple way of creating a handout that tries to illustrate these options in a simple way. I think, townhouse versus middle housing land division is an easy one that we can do. And on a process like this, I think if somebody said they wanted to do a middle housing land division, we would say, have you looked at townhouses? Because, it gets you far more options and that kind of thing. So we work really hard to make sure that we talk to folks a lot, when they come in, before they submit anything. But and we've talked about kind of what are our handouts? Is there another handout that is specific to the land division piece? Because we have them for everything else, and really trying to, put a packet together, or, and see if other communities have one and borrow theirs and try to put something together. So we've talked about internally, and we want to put something together specifically for middle housing land division, because there's just, it's a whole salad bar of options, and it's a lot.
One of the jurisdictions that was at the event I was at last week, they have rolled out an AI tool to assist with I know, I saw your face. This is a big, messy conversation, but it is the direction that some cities are already going, to help folks think through the options for this. And I think it really depends on the database that you load in advance and how, how constrained that tool is. But I think it's a fascinating conversation that's rolling out exponentially fast at the national level.
Yeah.
No more gray hairs, though.
No, it's all right. No.
Council President, did you have a question?
Yeah, I will say, AI is one thing, paper flow chart is probably something else with some and/or gates that might be a simpler solution. I don't know. But my real question is this development a townhouse or a middle housing?
It's a triplex right now.
It is a triplex,
Yeah,
so it's middle housing.
Yes, it is. It's 3 units on one lot. It's built right now. You can
I know
go
it,
see.
I know it well.
Yep.
And it looks like townhouses. It just kind of looks like townhouses.
Yep, it was,
That's
Well,
yes.
it was built before we had the.
Yeah, it was all before
Correct,
that, but it
yes.
just looks like townhouses.
Yeah. We've used that as an example when we were even doing all the middle housing. Oh, we have some existing ones. Look at this, and here it is.
Okay,
But
all right.
yes, it's actually a pretty good example, I think. So, yeah.
So I guess go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah.
I'll say it.
No, this was something that I just wanted you all to know what we're dealing with on the back here and stuff, but yeah.
Code is almost, the state requirements are almost a disincentive for ownership.
Well, except that without it, you wouldn't be able to divide any of these things. The only way to do any of these as an ownership would be as a condominium kind of situation. And I think, as I said, I think from what I understood when House Senate Bill 458 and all that even happened, was that there was an alternative to that. There are strings attached to that alternative, absolutely. And I think, and what we're hearing from folks that know more about this, the financing end of this than I do, that it's easier to get financing for fee simple, even if it's kind of a strange configuration like this, than a condominium situation. So I think that's part of, and we're all sort of, when the planners all get together and talk, we keep hoping that the lending institutions and so on can kind of catch up to all of these things that we're doing, because I think this is pretty new for a lot of your typical financing kinds of things. And what do you mean it's a detached triplex? That looks like a house. Like, yeah, it is, but it's also, and so trying to kind of help folks get the money they need to be able to build these things too. So it's an alternative. It's not simple, but if they're set up for it right at the beginning, it provides a nice alternative to kind of your typical situation.
You say that it's not really incentivized ownership because of the complexity of how the division is in the.
Yeah, especially like that, that first slide, that idea that you have to have water going to each, utilities going to each unit. I guess I see why you want that, but it means you can't, it means if you try to retrofit after you build it, it's a huge thing to retrofit and do it.
Yeah.
If somebody had built that and then decided later, I want to be able to sell them, I don't want to be the landlord for everybody, then, it's just a lot of cost to retrofit to be able to divide them.
Well, and
Existing, I can see, if the new development, because typically those would be cheaper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're getting, requests sort of all over the map. The cottage cluster that's under construction right now on 40th will not be a middle housing land division. They've opted to not do that. So they could still do it as a condominium and sell each unit and have a homeowners association that's managing all the other stuff, or they could be rentals. So there's still an ownership option. And for a cottage cluster, given how all the utilities have to work, it would be complicated to try to run them, but they didn't set it up that way. So it won't be divided later. Unless they want to, rerun all the utilities, which I'm sure they don't. So it's another alternative. It doesn't work really beautifully depending on the site plan of the development, but, yeah, so.
That's gonna stay rental, most likely.
I don't know that they've totally decided, because it still could be a condominium and be just like it is. So you don't need to have separate utilities for a condominium, because they can all share as long as there's the easements and that kind of language is set up for that. So, yeah. And one of the comments that the Planning Commission had when we talked about this was making sure that we weren't requiring homeowners associations as part of these things. So our language does talk about that, but we've included language or other similar entity. There needs to be something, some entity that's sort of managing these easements or who's responsible for all of this stuff, but we've added a little bit of language that hopefully broadens it without, we don't require a homeowners association, but something that functions like that can help with that sort of situation. For any of these developments that, right, but if you have something that's, that if they're all these tracts or easements and that kind of thing. So I just wanted to acknowledge that there was a comment from the Planning Commission specifically about that. So we wanted to try to give it a little bit more room if there is another way to organize management responsibilities for that kind of stuff. So, yeah, but anyway.
Does that have to get that entity or is that captured somewhere in the deed?
That would generally be in the deed, that, yes, yep. There's language that talks about that, and we have some kind of floating around the city for various or planned developments. Part of the issue is, if they never actually form or they don't meet anymore, who do we go to deal with something? So it doesn't happen that often, but when it does, we're trying to figure out who to contact. Right, yeah, so, but anyway. So that's concludes the presentation. I mean,
that's
that's it. I mean, the code,
I thought we were just partway through.
no, that's, I mean,
We have
these,
4 council members and an urban planner.
so, yeah. No, so happy to answer any, I know we spent a lot of time kind of on this piece, but if there are any questions or comments about sort of the other, how we've reorganized it, the numbering, any of the language, the type 3 subdivision is now a type 2. I mean, this really is intended to be kind of housekeeping plus for Title 17, but for a couple of these new things. But again, I wanted to just let you know about how this middle housing land division thing is happening. And anyway, yeah.
I have a few from my reading of the code.
My only question, I don't have comments, but question was, as far as from a policy standpoint, to the extent that we're making changes, you mentioned the type 3, type 2.
Yeah.
But otherwise, the policy changes were mandated by law, by state law. in the
Correct.
sense that we had to do this.
Yep. And for the most part, they were already in our code. We're reorganizing and clarifying things. The tracks and easements piece, that's new, but that's not really a policy. It's a way of handling tracks and easements. The leftover parcel, I see that more as an administrative situation, that there's not really I guess there is a policy, because we're trying to make sure that when somebody divides a large parcel like that we're going to make sure that we get minimum density on that leftover parcel. So, yeah. So from a policy standpoint, that is something that's in our comprehensive plan and in our housing, needs analysis, and we want to make sure we're getting the units that we're supposed to get. So I guess to that extent, we are touching policy, but in a way of making sure that we meet policy, which we currently don't have anything that says that now. Yeah.
Okay. And was there anything, I mean, you guys have done a fantastic job, I think, of updating it. But is there anything that was policy controversial that you would have liked to have brought forward and you didn't because you were just trying to keep it simple?
Honestly, we've hit all the things that we wanted.
Okay.
We wanted to
got what you
do.
need.
Yeah, this helps us streamline a lot of things. And we did, I should have mentioned, I have been going back and forth and talking with the county surveyor too, to make sure that we're not doing anything that sort of runs counter to their stuff. And so we're streamlining also by allowing folks to do, if it is effectively a property line adjustment, this is getting into the weeds, but it affects a plat. Normally, our current code would make you go through a replat process. So you're submitting a replat, then you're still submitting a final plat, if all you're doing is actually adjusting a property line. There's language in the ORS, and the county land division code has it as well, that you can still do that as a property line adjustment. It simplifies the process for everybody. The county surveyor still gets what they need from a recording standpoint, but it allows an applicant to do something as simple as a property line adjustment in a much more similar, in a simpler way. Fees are less, it's less process for everybody, and you still get what you need. So that was one thing we were really hoping to do, because we kind of keep going through extra steps, and so we aligned ourselves with what the county and the county surveyor are allowing folks to do, which it's not really policy. I just wanted to bring that up as an idea that we just wanted to make sure that we were simplifying things and keeping things as clear and objective as we possibly could for that. But, yeah.
Okay, I had a few questions. First off was numbered.
Mm-hmm.
Why, I mean, I realize the existing code has this numbering where they jump 4 and then 2 and then, why keep that numbering? Why not do 17.1 and 17.2?
Yeah.
17.3?
I think, and I didn't really spend a lot of time thinking about that, except that if there was another state law that came through that we had room to add stuff in between. Otherwise, we are renumbering everything after it. So, because I've had to do that for other codes, that you end up you fix one thing and you're renumbering a ton of pages after that. So it gives us room to insert additional language if we ever need to. It's really just that basic, I guess, but.
Okay. Well, I mean, I can kind of see
yeah.
that, although people have other ways of numbering, they put an A or whatever.
Sure, yeah.
But I mean, they're not even uniform. Some of them
Right.
are 4, some of
Yep,
them are
okay.
2, some of them are 6, they're like, one of them's 8,
Okay.
It seems like, I mean, I get if you want to leave some space, but I don't know, it just seems wonky to me.
Okay.
The fine is set out at $200. And I guess I was trying to, you know, we're used to so many things, fines, some of our fines and other things being in the fee schedule.
Mm-hmm.
And adjusting every year or whatever.
Right.
So, but I guess, I can't remember how we left it in the tree code. I guess maybe we don't do that with the tree code fines. So, fee schedule, so it does adjust.
It does.
Or to
Or you
reset
all can adjust.
every
We'll
year.
do the fee, but you all can adjust.
So I guess I just wondered if
Mhm.
that was a conscious decision to treat it differently than other fines, or?
It's a good it's in the code now, and we just didn't change it. So, but we can take another look at it and see if it needs to be moved somewhere else. So, yep.
Mayor, are you saying, with respect to the tree code, is there a fine in there, or there's a permit fee to do something? There's a fine being, okay. And so when you do the open the fee schedule, it includes fines, it's not just fees? Okay.
Yep.
No, you're great. Yeah, so, and we're actually about to investigate that and open up the package again. So this is the perfect moment.
Great.
If you all want to pull this out, we can put it in. We're talking about it at the study session.
Okay.
I just wondered.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's a good
It's different.
Yep.
Treating different things differently. So, yeah.
Well, those get an escalator, which other things would. Package it in.
Yep. Oh, that's a good point.
I have a question here that does not make sense to me, so I guess I will try to figure it out later maybe and ask her offline. But, in the definitions, WS60, it talks about monuments, which I found very interesting. You know, the property corners mean a fixed, permanent, and visible landmark containing boundaries. I don't know hardly any. I mean, I had to have a survey done when I built a sidewalk, and I didn't even think I had any on my
Yeah.
property, and they did find some, but they're definitely not visible. I mean, so.
New ones are,
New ones
old
are.
ones aren't.
Oh, yeah.
So, yes. And that's the ORS, I mean, that's the whole land surveyor section of the ORS talks about monumentation, and that's straight out of their code. Yeah.
They're supposed to be visible.
Yes, and new ones are. I mean, they, you know, when you can find your pins, you know, for a new subdivision, certainly old ones. That's why they go out with metal detectors trying to find iron rods and pins and so on. So, yeah, they aren't always findable, but, yeah.
Years ago, I paid for a right-of-way permit to put a flower bed in what I thought was encroaching into the
Mhm.
right-of-way, and then when I later did a survey, I actually found out it wasn't in the right-of-way, it was all in my property,
Yeah.
and I paid for a right-of-way permit I didn't need. But, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, yeah, okay. That's it for my sort of questions from the language. Yeah. Other questions?
I didn't have a question, I did have a comment.
Okay.
As someone who does this work, I was so excited. This was the first thing here for me in work session because I clean codes, I reformat them, and it's a lot of work. And so I just want to congratulate you and the rest of the staff that worked on this because there's a lot of thinking in going through that and formatting and trying to do best practices and making it easy to read and done a really good job.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
You're the queen of code.
Oh, my God. Very much.
Pardon?
Which Scott needs after.
Scott needs a, okay. All right.
Thanks very much. We'll see you in April for we'll do this again.
Okay. Okay.
I think we're still on the air, so if you could read that thing.
Yeah, so I think it's the next meeting, we're going to select the volunteer of the year. And so I just wanted to make sure that we were kind of all on board with the process of how that happens. And so I went back and looked at it last year. And last year it was, we got we have the applications. And so last year we basically got a ballot. There's no discussion of the candidates. There's no deliberations. You base it, really off of your own knowledge and the application. And so during the first ballot, it came back 2, and 1. And sort of on the fly, there was sort of a mutual decision made that, okay, we got to have a runoff. It'll be the top 2 people. And so then it came back a 3-2 decision, and that's how the winner was picked. And I'm not saying that's the way to do it or that's not the way to do it. I just kind of want us to have a common expectation about how we're going to do it. And so, that's why I went back to last year to look at that again. But there were really no discussions or deliberations. And as a matter of fact, you commented on that, is that you felt it was a bit awkward because you just kind of get a piece of paper and you write names down.
Yeah, I mean, I will say over the years, I think counselors don't generally want to, there's been a desire not to have a lot of conversation because they don't want to be picking somebody, I mean, they don't, it's awkward because you're sort of pitting people against each other or whatever. But, I mean, I think it could be different. It could be that counselors come in and say who they, I mean, we could have more of a conversation about the relative merits of people who were nominated. I think traditionally there's been, some reluctance to do that, just, for obvious reasons.
Well, going back to what I said, I really don't have I'm not proposing a change or not. I just want common expectations about how it's going to go. Because I agree with you, the focus just should be on celebrating the volunteers. Rather than, kind of like a job interview or something like that. But I just kind of want us to understand, how we're going to approach this.
Well, and if somebody thinks they want to have a more, if some counselors want to have, I mean, I'm glad you brought this up. If some counselors want to have more of a conversation about the relative merits of nominees, I guess we would call them. They're not applicants, nominees. Let's have that conversation. Does anybody feel that way?
So,
This will be fun.
no one heard it. So in the past, just so I'm clear, because I'm trying to remember how we used to do it, the counselors and the mayor nominate a name, one name, multiple names?
No.
And then there's
we got a list.
The whole packet.
You probably haven't seen it.
Oh, okay.
We got a list of 10 nominees or something, and some of them have multiple nominations, some of them have only one nomination, but we've gotten a list of names. Then we'll get a ballot with those names on it, and we'll check it, and Scott usually has a whole stack of ballots because he's anticipating doing 2 or 3 cycles of balloting to get to a person. But we do that without much conversation about the nominees.
And then, so to Councilor Massey's question, are you going to do it differently, or is that the way it's going to be done again?
Well, and I think sorry, I'm going to just jump in here because I've talked to a couple of you. I think that the question is how we also agenda it. So if it's going to be a straight vote, then we just need to put on there that it's a vote and not a discussion. If it's going to be a discussion, we should put on there that it's a deliberation. So whatever y'all decide is awesome. I think there's just clarity on the agenda for people's expectations. Maybe. Do you have something you want to say? Okay. Do you all want to think about it and talk about it at the end of the night? Okay. I think.
Nope, I don't think I have anything else.
Do you want to adjourn?
Yeah, I guess we are adjourned and we will convene for the regular session at 6 o'clock.